The sandstorm in City B raged as I arrived at the James family home. My biological brother came to pick me up.
It sounds like a ghost here.
He fell silent.
Who are you?
My name is James. You should call me brother.
His name sounds like burning corpses. Is the James family bad at naming people?
Michael tapped my forehead, laughing heartily.
Little Jane has been spoiled by me. Please be more understanding.
It's fine.
I didn't bring much luggage. Michael waved his hand, assuring me that someone would send my things over. As we reached the James family home, I had my hands in my pockets.
City B really is wild and turbulent.
James didn't respond and quickly walked into the house, almost fleeing.
What does he have to resist? Our little Jane is so talented and beautiful. If it weren't for the elders' decision, I would argue with them. It feels like we're the ones eager to join their family.
Exactly. I don't want to call him a ghost.
A voice called James from inside, probably the head of the James family. In the Lin family, few elders would point fingers at me. I was the only girl of my generation, and my brothers all doted on me. My parents were gentle people, so I didn't fear elders. I followed James into the house and looked up to meet the eyes of an elderly man. He was a very authoritative figure, once a strict military officer. Even after retirement, he worked tirelessly for the James family. The most helpless thing he ever did was ask my father to take me away during a crisis in the James family.
Grandpa.
Next to Robert stood a girl who I assumed was Emily. I could feel Emily watching me intently.
James must have told you, from now on, you'll be called Anna. This is Emily, she's a bit younger than you and was adopted to avoid suspicion back then. You should rest for now. The day after tomorrow, we'll hold a banquet at home to officially announce your return. We'll say that Emily was mistakenly swapped with you back then. Emily, call her sister.
Emily pursed her lips and called me sister, which made me feel delighted. I had always been the youngest, and now finally someone would call me sister. We presented a harmonious scene of sisterly affection, but James's expression was somewhat strange, as if he wanted to say something but didn't.
I'll go upstairs first.
As soon as James left, Emily came forward and took my arm.
Sister, don't mind him. He's just strange.
I love having a sister, soft and sweet.
It felt like the sandstorm in City B had been washed away. I hadn't even had the chance to say a few words to my sister when a woman rushed in, heading straight towards me. Without a word, she hugged me tightly and started crying.
My daughter, my poor daughter, it's all my fault.
Jane, don't scare the child.
It turned out that the woman sobbing uncontrollably was my biological mother. Emily and I helped her sit down, each of us handing her tissues from either side, but her crying only intensified.
Mom, please don't cry. I'm all right.
Her tears left me at a loss for how to comfort her, and I found her distress rather inexplicable since I hadn't suffered at all these past years.
Sweetheart, don't worry. Mom will make it up to you. I would never do anything like those mothers in novels who mistreat their real daughters for the sake of the fake ones. I will cherish you dearly.
I shivered and glanced at Emily. Sure enough, she looked forlorn and a bit hurt. I wished I could cover Mom's mouth to stop her from saying more. Goodness, what if my newly reunited adorable sister turns against me?
Mom, don't worry. I've had a great life, and my sister and I will both bring you joy. Please treat us equally.
Perfect, now both of them were moved to tears. Within an hour of arriving at the James household, I had gauged everyone's attitude towards me. Grandpa, my sister, and Mom were all delighted by my arrival. Dad, although away on a trip, had left a bank card for me with the password being my birthday. It was said to be my allowance saved up since childhood. They had initially planned to send me money anonymously each month but feared I might report it as money laundering. The only one acting strangely was my older brother. My attitude was, whatever, as long as he didn't badmouth me in front of Emily and ruin my perfect sister image. After dinner, Mom had a heart-to-heart with me in my room, repeatedly expressing her guilt and determination to make it up to me. I kept assuring her it wasn't necessary, but she insisted, saying she knew I must care deeply.
All right then.
Tomorrow, you won't be going to school. Instead, I'll take you around the city.
Mom, with this sandstorm, is it really necessary?
Then let's go shopping for some clothes.
Can we take Emily along? I don't want her to feel left out.
Of course, that's a great idea.
As soon as Mom returned to her room, Emily knocked on my door.
Emily, come in. I have something for you.
Seeing her bright eyes, I quickly invited her in and handed her a gift I had prepared.
Look, I got this from my fourth brother. It's for you.
She opened the box to find a beautiful jade bracelet, its gentle green hue perfectly suiting her. Without waiting for her response, I slipped the bracelet onto her wrist.
My taste is impeccable.
When I looked up, Emily's eyes were brimming with tears and I panicked.
What's wrong, Emily? Why are you crying?
I thought you wouldn't like me, sister.
Whoever said I don't like you is talking nonsense. Don't cry, sweetheart. I can't stand seeing little girls cry.
I hugged Emily to comfort her, secretly rejoicing. My adorable sister is so close to me.
The next morning, only John was at the breakfast table. I chose a seat as far from him as possible, not wanting to ruin my mood entirely.
Why are you staring at me?
John snorted and, with a determined look, spoke up.
Don't even think about replacing Emily. We only have one daughter in this family, and that's Emily.
I raised an eyebrow, baffled by his behavior, but continued eating in silence. Soon, others joined us at the table. John, who ate the fastest, stood up and walked to the staircase. He then turned back, looking down at me as if he were doing me a favor.
You're in the same class as me. Hurry up and come with me.
Grandpa tapped his finger on the table, clearly displeased.
John, how are you speaking to your sister? Apologize.
Sorry. Sister.
I laughed heartily and linked arms with Emily.
It's okay, brother. But Mom said yesterday that she would take me and Emily out to play. You go to class by yourself.
John was furious but dared not say anything with Grandpa and Mom nearby. He stormed upstairs. After finishing my meal, I headed upstairs and passed by John. He glared at me again.
John, you like Emily, don't you?
I smiled confidently and floated back to my room. John's hostility towards me was too abrupt, and his gaze towards Emily was too obvious. Perhaps no one in the family had considered that his affection for Emily might be romantic, but it was clear to me as an outsider. Shopping with parents can be exhausting, especially when they are trying to make up for something. Mom's attempts at compensation were a bit over the top. If it weren't for Emily helping to share the burden, I might have collapsed in the mall within 2 hours. We had lunch at a food court in the mall. By then, I was already quite tired. Leaning back in my chair to rest, I left the ordering to them. Emily asked about my dietary restrictions.
Is there anything you can't eat?
Before I could respond, a male voice suddenly chimed in.
She doesn't eat ginger, garlic, cilantro, any green vegetables, cooked radishes, fatty meat, crab roe, only fish belly, no raw or semi-raw meat except for steak, and not overly sweet desserts.
Emily exclaimed, recognizing the voice.
David.
Mom's face twisted a bit. I nodded at David in greeting.
You know each other?
David is our next-door neighbor.
She turned to me, her eyes seeming brighter than usual.
Sister. Do you know David?
He was a college friend of my fourth brother, and stayed with us for a while.
That's great, sister.
Ha! What's great?
Emily seemed to realize she had said too much and laughed it off.
Nothing, nothing.
Sensing that Emily didn't particularly like David, I didn't invite him to join us for lunch. David had other things to do and left first. That night, lying in bed after a shower, I realized that both Emily and Mom had acted strangely towards David. I recalled the time I had spent with David. He had come to our city at my fourth brother's invitation and naturally stayed at our house. He was very considerate and an excellent cook, knowing my dietary preferences well. Tossing and turning, I finally decided to get up and ask for clarification. I called Emily and posed my question.
Why does Mom act so strangely towards David?
Emily hesitated before answering.
He's very strict. We were all afraid of him growing up, even the older brothers.
Strict? I didn't notice that. But if it's just that, why does Mom act so strangely too?
Emily dropped a bombshell.
Because our families have a marriage arrangement. I always thought I was doomed. Sister, you seem to have a good impression of David, right?
The first day of class with John was quite emotional. The teacher, knowing that John and I were siblings, arranged for me to sit right in front of him.
As soon as I sat down, all the girls in the class turned their eyes towards me.
Whispering to herself, why are all these lovely girls so blind to fancy John?
Thinking about sisters reminded me of my dear Emily. She wasn't in the same class as John. Didn't John really like Emily?
Concerned, what if Emily gets bullied in another class?
The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I kicked John from behind.
Startled, who kicked me?
Rolling her eyes, still half asleep, aren't you?
During the break, John cornered me. Everyone else had gone to the field for exercises, and the teacher had turned a blind eye to me skipping it.
Accusingly, it was you who kicked me, wasn't it?
Defiantly, yes, it was me. So what?
Coldly, I've said it before, our family will only have one daughter, Emily. Don't think you can use these little tricks to win me over.
His confidence startled me and I took several steps back.
Defensive, back off, back off.
John suddenly got furious like he'd lost his mind.
Angrily, don't even think about getting into our family. Don't you dare.
Before he could finish, Emily rushed over and interrupted him.
Protectively, John. What are you doing?
She hurriedly grabbed my hand and pulled me behind her.
Fiercely, John, I warned you before. Don't bother my sister. Even if you lose your mind, don't take it out on her.
That night, I tossed and turned in bed, happily recalling how Emily had stood up for me during the day.
Dreamily, she actually helped me. She even scolded her brother, whom she's lived with for over a decade. She really loves me.
My fourth brother had heard me recount this event countless times.
Teasingly, yes, yes, and she's very pretty, smells nice, and likes to hold your hand.
Beaming, exactly, exactly.
While I was still bragging to my fourth brother, Emily suddenly knocked on the door.
Urgently, John's been taken to the station. Stunned, what?
John had called Emily to bail him out, but she didn't dare tell our parents, so she had to drag me along.
Comforting, it's okay, it's okay. He probably didn't do anything too serious. Otherwise, how could he still call you?
When we arrived at the police station, we found out that John had gone to a bar after class, got drunk and inexplicably got into a fight.
Curious, who are you to him and where are your parents?
Emily, encountering such a situation for the first time, was at a loss.
Confidently, we're his sisters. We're not of age yet, so we can't bail him out, right? I guess he'll have to stay here for the night.
nodding yes, yes. Then tomorrow, huh? Who's being wronged?
Sweetly, officer, can I ask what my brother did? So I can report back to our mom.
The officer, probably encountering such a sibling dynamic for the first time, was taken aback.
Explaining, your brother got into a fight with someone. He said he saw a guy bothering a girl.
The officer pointed, and I followed his gaze to see a girl standing in the corner. She had heavy makeup, yellowed fingers from long-term smoking, and was talking on the phone in a flirtatious tone.
Puzzled, didn't he say he liked Emily? Why would he get into a fight over another girl?
The next day, John was bailed out by the family and received a severe scolding from Grandpa. I thought this incident was just a minor episode, but 3 months later, on the day the college entrance exams ended, John brought that girl home and announced he wanted to marry her. Our family sat on the sofa surrounding the girl. She introduced herself as Sophia. She wore bright makeup and crossed her legs. I noticed her fingers kept fidgeting, but she never stood up. She probably knew not to smoke in the house. Perhaps John had told her beforehand.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sophia.
Sophia looked no different from the only other time I had seen her, but John was acting strangely. He didn't have a habit of smoking, but he kept rubbing his hands, likely out of nervousness. What struck me as odd was that he kept glancing at Emily, which he normally wouldn't do. And today he didn't even glare at me. Feeling something was off, I gave Emily a look. She understood and took Sophia's arm.
Sister, you must be tired from all the talking. Let me make you a drink. Can you come with me? I don't know what you like or dislike. My brother never mentioned you to us.
Emily pulled Sophia to the small kitchen in the yard. Once I was sure Sophia couldn't hear us, I nodded at Grandpa. He hadn't spoken until now, but seeing my nod, he finally did. Grandpa, a seasoned veteran, could be very imposing when needed. He looked at John with a piercing gaze, making John shrink back.
I didn't discipline you much growing up. First, because you're a boy and need to toughen up to succeed. Second, because you were less troublesome than your sisters. But now, it seems you're not even as good as Sarah, let alone Emily, who we've spoiled since childhood.
I saw that girl when I bailed you out, John. Getting into a fight right before your exams was bad enough. I asked you then, and you never explained what happened. Now, I'm asking again, why did you fight over Sophia?
Dad, who had been away in the countryside during that time and knew nothing about this, almost spat out his tea. He slammed his cup on the table.
What? This happened?
Watching this three-way interrogation, I felt like a bystander. Despite the intense questioning, John remained tight-lipped, refusing to answer any of the elders' questions. I could see Dad was on the verge of hitting him, but probably reconsidered because the girl was still in the house. In the end, he stormed upstairs in anger. John abruptly stood up and pulled Sophia out of the house.
John didn't even take his phone.
Let him go without it. It's better if he doesn't come back. Running away from home, how dare he?
I went over to calm Mom down.
Don't be angry. Maybe he's just going through a rebellious phase. Without his phone, he can't go far. He's used to a comfortable life. He might just be taking the girl home and will come back.
I rolled my eyes.
Mom, I didn't ask before, but do you know the name of the bar where he fought?
Mom, now calmer, thought for a moment.
I think it was called a windflower?
I raised an eyebrow.
Well, what a coincidence.
The next day, I visited my third brother, William. He managed some of the Lin family's minor businesses in City B, including Fenghua.
William, I need to talk to you about something important.
William, always the tea aficionado, was brewing a pot as I spoke.
Sure, Michael. What's on your mind?
Do you remember the brawl at Fenghua 3 months ago?
William gestured for someone to call the person in charge of Fenghua.
Let's have some tea while we wait. By the way, with those hands and that face, you'd make a fortune as a gigolo.
William's expression changed instantly.
Michael, are you looking for trouble?
I stuck out my tongue playfully. Soon, the person in charge of Fenghua arrived.
Do you remember a fight in the bar 3 months ago?
Yes, it was John. The other group seemed like regular folks.
William chuckled.
So, you're here to investigate your so-called brother?
Don't talk. Why did they fight?
It was over a woman, but
Just say it.
the woman was from the red light district.
What? Was John out of his mind?
Those who fought with John were regulars there. John saw them harassing the woman, and after a few drinks, he started the fight. But miss, it was really just
some people flirting, and John intervened and got beaten up for it. After getting the information, I let the manager leave.
Why are you asking about this? You never cared about that so-called brother of yours.
You don't know, John brought that woman home and said he wanted to marry her.
William was shocked.
Your brother? Well, he has some ideas.
I asked William to look into John and Sophia's situation. Suddenly, I thought of David.
William, what do you think of David?
William frowned.
Why are you asking about David?
You know I have an engagement with him, right?
William avoided my gaze.
He's not a bad person, but his intentions aren't pure. Stay away from him. If you don't like the engagement, even if the Xiao family agrees, the Lin family won't allow it. Your happiness is what matters.
After meeting David, we kept in touch. A few days later, he sent me a message on WeChat.
Have you returned to the Xiao family?
How does everyone know about my background?
I replied with a simple yes. His status changed to typing. Then back to his name, then typing. Again. Then my fourth brother called me. After hanging up, I saw David's reply from half an hour ago.
You can come to me if you need anything.
I replied, no need, I have William in City B, and went to sleep. When I woke up, David had replied.
True, as long as someone is looking after you.
His words sounded wistful. Emily overheard my mumbling.
Who sounds wistful?
David. He sent this message last night.
Emily's eyes widened.
Sister. David definitely likes you.
I pulled her hands down and took a sip of water.
Forget it.
Emily followed me, nagging.
Sister, do you like David? If you do, that would be great. I'm so scared of David, he's really fierce.
Not really. David is quite gentle. He even played chess with me before, and when I cheated, he didn't say anything. If I cheated with my fourth brother, he would have hit me.
Emily's mouth twitched.
Sister, your definition of gentle is too shallow.
I laughed and hooked her arm, pulling her out for shopping.
Oh, that's not important. Thinking about liking or not liking someone now is not important. Early romance is not good.
As soon as we stepped out of the house, we ran into David from the house opposite.
Going out?
Emily shrank back the moment David spoke.
Yes, just wandering around. We'll be going now.
I quickly pulled Emily away. She was in low spirits the whole way.
What's wrong?
Sister, it's all my fault. I'm really scared of him. He always has a cold face. I even saw him scolding John before. He's really fierce.
He didn't scold you. I don't think even John is as scared of him as you are.
Emily slammed the table.
Because they keep telling me I have to marry him. I'm already scared of him, and thinking about spending many, many years with him makes me even more terrified.
Emily grabbed my hand, looking at me like I was her lifeline.
Sister, he's only gentle with you. When we greet him, he barely responds, but he took the initiative to greet you.
A few days after visiting my third brother, the graduation trip Emily and I had planned finally arrived. That day, John had run away from home, but Grandpa quickly had him brought back and kept him under strict supervision. For this trip, Grandpa was worried about us traveling alone, so he decided John should come along. At the airport, we ran into David.
Look, he's definitely going to come over.
Just as she spoke, David started walking towards us.
Graduation trip?
I nodded.
Your brother asked me to accompany you.
I was momentarily confused.
Which brother?
Your fourth brother. I'll check in your suitcases. Wait here.
As he walked away, I guessed he wouldn't be back for a while. I called my fourth brother.
Did you ask David to come with me on the trip?
Nonsense. He volunteered himself after dinner last week when you asked me about the flight time.
A subtle feeling crossed my mind.
Oh, I see.
Sis, why are you smiling like that?
What kind of description is that?
Don't get too close to him. Just treat him like a bodyguard. He probably came to H City just for you.
I laughed heartily, and just then David returned.
What were you talking about that made you so happy?
Nothing.
On the second leg of our trip on the plane, Emily turned to me.
David would make a great husband.
Shameless, saying such things.
She leaned back in her seat, looking up at the airplane lights, her voice turning somber.
Actually, the reason I initially tried to set you up with David was that I really didn't like him. I didn't want to marry someone I didn't like, so when I saw you didn't completely reject him, I thought it would be better if you were with him. Sis, do you know how much I envy you? You can show that you don't like John without worrying about him being your brother. If you don't like David, Michael will stand up for you. You can tell that John likes me, right? I knew I wasn't a biological member of the Xiao family when I was 9. They always taught me to be obedient and the perfect Xiao family lady. I asked Grandpa why I had to be perfect when I wasn't even his granddaughter. Do you know what he said? He said it was my duty. No one ever asked me if I was happy being Emily. No one asked if I wanted to be the perfect Xiao family lady. When you came back, I thought maybe the Xiao family didn't need me as their facade anymore. I thought they finally had someone else, but I realized you weren't a facade. You were freer than anyone. They couldn't control you, but they still loved you. I have to trade obedience for love, but you don't. I was really afraid I would become jealous or resentful. But fortunately, my sister is you.
Listening to my sister reveal her deepest, most hidden thoughts, those thoughts that were reasonable yet too afraid to show, I felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow. I hugged her tightly.
Emily, it's their fault. Be a little selfish. Such a beautiful girl should always be happy.
As soon as David disembarked from the plane, he noticed the redness in both of our eyes.
What's going on? What did you two do on the plane?
I had already calmed down.
We watched a really touching movie and both of us ended up crying.
I love you, sis.
I smiled and patted her head. On the plane, she had cried in my arms for a long time. After she finished crying, she looked up, still sobbing.
I didn't mean to tell you all this. I got sidetracked. I wanted to talk about David.
It's okay, it's okay. David is a minor issue.
The atmosphere between Emily and me was so good that I completely forgot about John watching us from behind. Throughout the trip, John had been relatively well-behaved, silent, and compliant. I never expected that something would happen that very night. Our second stop was by the sea. After dinner, I wanted to take a walk on the beach.
I'll come with you.
I'd prefer to go alone.
I declined and headed to the beach by myself. John blocked my path once again. I saw him standing by the rocks at the edge of the sea. The sun was setting, and his eyes were dark.
What do you want, John?
He walked closer, repeating the same phrase.
I told you not to get close to her. I told you not to get close to her.
His eyes looked strange, reflecting the sunset, appearing almost red. He lunged at me, as if to harm me. Quickly, I struck him below the belt and threw him over my shoulder, slamming him onto the ground behind me.
John, before you try to fight me, you should check if I know how to fight.
I've been practicing karate since I was a child, so handling John was more than manageable. I locked John's arm, but he kept struggling and shouting, giving me a headache. I knocked him out with a swift chop and called David. When David arrived, I was squatting on the beach, studying small crabs.
Hi.
He looked at me, then at John lying on the ground, and smiled helplessly. The next day, John was taken back by people sent by his grandfather. The trip without John was simply flawless. Emily rarely had the chance to go out and play for such a long time, and she thoroughly enjoyed herself. Seeing her happy made me happy too. The longer the trip went on, the more I understood Emily's words.
David would make a great husband.
He really knew how to take care of people. My thoughts were often scattered and spontaneous, and having David around was like having a guide who required no effort on my part, complete with voice navigation. He was always watching over me. You know, the way someone in a position of power cherishes you can be overwhelming. On the second to last stop, in the city where I had spent the first 18 years of my life, I told my fourth brother that I might have fallen for David.
I think I might have fallen for David.
I could tell. The way you look at him is different. Our little Michael has finally been swept away. Gentle and steady wins the race, huh?
I laughed heartily, collapsing onto him, and suddenly remembered what Emily had confided in me.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you for loving me unconditionally.
He gave me a playful knock on the head.
You silly girl.
Ouch. Someone's trying to harm their sister.
Who would have thought that the next day, David would tell me he had to leave early and might not be able to accompany me for the rest of the trip.
I have to leave early. I might not be able to accompany you for the rest of the trip.
It's okay. Just don't say, the rest of the trip, like it's the end of the world.
When you get back to the city, send me a message. I'll come pick you up. I have something to tell you.
I looked into his eyes, and it felt like I knew what he was going to say. We both smiled suddenly.
Sure.
By mid-August, I had returned to City B. After a trip with Emily, I noticed she had become much more lively and was more willing to be close to me. This journey not only brought me a genuine sister but also helped me understand my own heart, which was a wonderful outcome. This time, without David, Emily and I went to pick up our luggage ourselves.
Did you find the car?
I found the license plate number, but as soon as I got into the car, something felt off. There was a strange smell, like a sedative. I quickly tried to open the door, but my eyes involuntarily closed. In a daze, I seemed to see Sophia. When I woke up, I was in what appeared to be an abandoned factory. I cursed Sophia for her lack of creativity. Why do kidnappings always happen in such dirty and messy places? I looked around but couldn't find Emily. I kicked a nearby steel plate hard, making some noise. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Sophia and John came in. I stared at them as they approached and smiled.
Long time no see, John. Are you planning to get rid of me?
John sat in a chair opposite me, his cheeks sunken and his face dark and gloomy, no longer possessing the gentle appearance he had when I first met him. He didn't speak, and neither did Sophia.
John, you like Emily. Emily told me you confessed to her before, and she was scared to death and rejected you. But you sneaked into her room at night and stood by her bed, and since then, she has been avoiding you.
John glared at me fiercely.
If it weren't for you, if you hadn't come, Emily wouldn't be avoiding me. It's all because of you. You should just disappear.
He suddenly lunged forward and grabbed my neck.
It's all you. You should just disappear.
He had learned from his last encounter with me, so this time, he had tied my hands and feet in advance. I was struggling to breathe under his grip. Sophia hurriedly pulled him away.
What are you doing? I need the money you promised me.
I suddenly understood and gasped for air, looking at Sophia.
So that's how it is. You found out he likes Emily, didn't you? Maybe through his phone. Maybe through something else. You threatened to tell Grandpa? He's most afraid of Grandpa, so he gave you money to keep quiet.
I leaned back in the chair, observing their reactions.
John brought you to the house just to see if Emily liked you, right? How confident must you be to think Emily would like someone with such issues?
I laughed at myself and then looked at Sophia.
After I sent John back, he had no money left, right?
So you decided to kidnap me.
You two must have had a disagreement about the kidnapping. John must have wanted to get rid of me because he thinks I took Emily away from him. But you're different. You just want to make money off me. The Xiao family and the Lin family both have plenty of money. The sedative was yours, right? You drugged the driver the family sent, or maybe John sent him away. Drugging seems more likely since John is already under family control. For someone like you, getting some sedatives is quite easy.
I looked up at the sky, feeling tired. It was the first time in 18 years that I had been kidnapped. There was a big hole in the roof of the abandoned factory.
John, do you really think no one would notice you kidnapped me?
John had been too well protected, his plan was full of holes.
For instance, you didn't take my phone, whether before I got in the car, or after I was locked up here.
When I realized something was wrong in the car, I was texting David, telling him the family had sent a driver and he should go home first. Because of the sedative, I only managed to send half the message. David realized something was wrong, and my phone had a tracking system. This was a very simple kidnapping case. Only someone as delusional as John could think he would succeed. John once again screamed and lunged at me, trying to strangle me. This time, I didn't have to wait long. I saw the police break through the factory door, and I saw David running towards me. He shoved John aside and hugged me, repeatedly apologizing, saying he was late.
I'm so sorry, I was late.
It's okay, I wasn't gone.
In that moment, his tears fell. Those were David's tears, and the love he had for me. Emily was unharmed, just a bit sedated. John couldn't bear to do anything to her. John was taken away by the police. David said he would probably be locked up for a few years. Even if Grandpa wanted to protect him, the Lin family wouldn't let him off. Weighing the pros and cons, the Xiao family chose to abandon John. When the maple leaves in the yard started to turn red, I went out and once again ran into David.
Heading out?
No, I came to ask. What do you want to tell me?
He was slightly surprised but quickly returned to his gentle demeanor.
I want to say, I like you. Will you be my girlfriend?
The moment the first yellow leaf fell, I said.
Sure.